Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Cultural Reset. Happy Women's History Month. Okay. Woohoo, woohoo, applause. If everyone applause, we can do that. Um, but again, we are here with you this week with another incredible artist. We're here with Susan Darvishi. She is an Iranian American artist, and she is a part of this cultural reset that we're trying to fuel. So, Susan, if you want to introduce yourself with your pronouns.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Susan Darvishi. I go by she, her, and I am a singer-songwriter that's based in the SF Bay Area currently. But I used to live in New York for a couple of years, and before that, I was in Virginia. So I've moved a lot.
She's lived all over the
Yes.
true artist experience. We love it. So we're just gonna start off with our standard question that we always ask all our artists, as you know. When and where did your individual creative journey begin?
Sure. Um, there's like kind of there was like a start and a stop. It was a lot of starts and stops. When I was younger, just as a kid, I always loved music, and my parents, everyone in my family loves to sing around the house. So then I did the same thing. And I got really into music when it came to high school. I started joining a bunch of, chorus and choir groups. And I learned how to play the guitar a little bit, not as well as I do now, but I was like starting. And I always loved music, but I wasn't sure whether or not it was possible as a career choice. And that's something that has always been, I don't know, in my area, it was better to go for like what was considered a real job. So I was hesitant always about sharing that how much I loved music and how much I loved singing specifically. Um, but my senior year of high school, I wrote my first song and I performed it in front of the school, and it got a lot of good feedback. So I kind of took it from there. And once I got to college, I decided, I'm still going to pursue my creative endeavors, but I still wanted, to have a backup just in case. So funny enough, I studied computer science in college.
Oh,
Just like out of curiosity, I thought it was cool. And then, but then after college, I was like, all right, this is my moment. And I really went for it after college. And here I am.
that's an incredible story. Could you
Thank you.
talk to us a little bit about kind of because I know that there's other artists that are in the same position as you, right? Artists that are raised and they're just like their parents are the ones that are influencing, saying, "Hey, get a real job, go do this field, do this." Um, and they end up going to college and they end up taking this sort of conventional path of education. And then once they get out of that college, they're on this cusp. Do I pursue my dream or do I pursue the more practical paths? So, like, was there some sort of pivotal moment that happened that's made you say, yes, I'm going to go this direction. This is all my dream. Even after college, I'm still going to do this. What was that
It's
like?
gonna sound really cheesy, but there was. So it kind of happened throughout multiple points during college. I kept saying, because I still wanted to be realistic. I was like, this is a hard industry. If I'm gonna do it, I have to go all in. There's no like, I don't want to say that word, so I'm not gonna say it. There's no like just doing it halfway. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to just like kind of try it a little bit and then not go all the way. You really want to go for it if you're going to do it. So, in college, I mean, I had different creative outlets. So, like, I minored in producing for film. I love film. That's a whole different side of me. But again, all of it was like music, film, all of it. I wanted to do it. But I also was really scared about just putting myself out there. So I was like, I'm going to wait till I'm really, really sure. And if I keep getting hints at life that, like, hey, go for it, then do it. So I kind of went by like weird, like, signals. If I thought that if somebody told me, or if I met a music producer, which I ended up doing right after college finished, I met this guy, Colin Callahan, who I had a class with him, a computer science course with him my freshman year of college. And we ended up reconnecting. And he said, "Do you want to just work on music for fun?" And I was like, well, that's kind of a hint to go towards music, right? Like, why don't we go with the flow and try that? And then I realized how much fun it was to make music and write songs with him. And I had no idea. It just felt the easiest out of everything that I had ever tried. You know, I had tried other passions I had had, but the only thing that came to me the fastest and the easiest was music writing. And I was like, well, I should probably just go with what my gut is telling me and actually go for it. And as soon as I realized I had like one really good song with Colin, and he ended up actually, he was saying, "Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yes, please give it to me." Because he could have released it on his own. So, but we had written it together. So he was kind enough. He was like, "You go release this as your first one." And it was my song "Tastes Like Summer" was my first one. And because it got such good feedback, all my family friends were super supportive. My parents, who had no idea I was this serious about music, were like, "Okay, you win. We'll support you. Go do it." And that was kind of my big push. It was like realizing after the fact, like, hey, actually, it's possible. Like, it's not such a crazy idea. Then I was like, let's do it.
It was within your grasps.
Yeah.
You seem very passionate about many different things, and music is one of them. But when you said that music writing comes to you easily, so how do you get into the mindset, or are you always in the mindset of writing music? Like, what does your creative space look like?
Sure. You know, when I was younger, it was honestly like a kind of therapeutic thing for me. I felt everything very strongly in high school, so sometimes still do. So I would just write down poems and songs, but I was like, when I was younger, I was like, this isn't going anywhere. This is just for me, right? So it's okay to write these stories. And then I started listening to music like Taylor Swift's, and I think sometimes people don't give her enough credit. I mean, recently they have been, but she writes from the heart. And I started realizing the more you write about your personal stories, the better the song comes out. Um, so what I do is recently, as practice, I write a song every day. Even if it's not finished, I try my best to get a lyric down. And then the most fun part is when you get to try different melodies with what you've written, the lyrics you've written. And a lot of the times it happens when I'm getting ready in the morning. I just like there's a certain like song I've listened to, and I'm like, oh, what if I took like some of the style of that song but changed it here and like tried this melody with these lyrics. And it's kind of just like trying a bunch of different things and seeing where it goes. Like sometimes I'll pick up the guitar and play four random chords and see what lyrics pop into my head. um, but most of the time, I mean, I also, when I was younger, I write stories, just fiction. And it's kind of the same thing with songwriting. You're writing a story you want people to resonate with. That's kind of how it works for me. Sometimes I have good weeks, and sometimes nothing pops up, and I'm like, darn. But you just keep trying until you get something good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
makes sense. I mean, the back side of it, writing your lyrics and then sitting down with the guitar, or sitting down with the guitar and coming up with your lyrics. You know, either way works. But so you play the guitar mostly then to write your songs.
I think it depends. So I always tell this is why I love producers. So I would say I am okay at the guitar. Not gonna say I'm like the best. Um, I mainly learned guitar so I could have something that could help me write songs. And I realized that at a younger age because I was like, wow, it's really hard to think about like the instrumental side of this because the melody was the easiest for me and the lyrics were the easiest things for me to come up with. So um, I would say it helps me get a starting point. Mm-hmm. And then I take those ideas to producers and I'm like, hey, I came up with this idea. What do you think? And a lot of the times there's a lot of instruments, of course, that I don't know how to play. So I'm like, could we add trumpet here? Or could we add a little bit of violin? And like, could it sound like this? And I'll kind of like sing it out for them in a voice memo note and then send it. And although it sounds really weird at the time, like it does help. So that's what I usually do.
That's so cool. I mean, the fact that you can be able to hear your own music and be like, I think I need some violin. Even if you don't know how to play the violin, you're like, this would sound nice because I know what this instrument sounds like and I know how I want it and this is how I want it here. That I think that that's awesome that you have the ability to kind of like transfer your creative energy with music into other instruments that you don't even know how to play.
Thank you. Well, a lot of the time, I think it came with practice though, because initially I didn't really know how the whole process worked with working with a producer. So I'd be like, here's a melody, good luck. And I was like, and then later on I realized, no, you gotta give them way more than that. Because it's kind of just like leaving them in the dark. You're like, do something with this. But it's grown a lot, the process. And now I actually try to think of, okay, what is the song actually going to be in my head? And then I'm like, okay, how can I tell them I want this? And then it becomes like a partnership and they bring in their own ideas too.
So your experience with producers has been good then? Because
I love it.
sometimes like they have their own creative agenda and it's like the artist has to almost fight to have the song turn out their own way.
I would say, that does happen sometimes, but it's all about finding the right partnership. You want to make sure from the beginning, and that's something you learn along the way after working with a couple. You want to make sure you find someone who's going to, who's willing to tell you when they think you're wrong, and also who's willing to say, okay, I'm wrong too. Like, let's try something new. And the producer I'm working with right now, Corey Burrell, love him. He's amazing. Like, we bounce ideas off of each other. We're always trying to push each other. Like, sometimes we'll be like, no, we got to do this. And sometimes he'll say, no, we have to keep this. And I love having that dynamic because you want someone who's willing to take in new ideas, but also fight for their own. So I think if you're finding yourself in a place where they're not reciprocating or they're not considering your ideas, then it's not a good partnership and you should probably find someone else.
Right. And that's been the case a lot of times, especially when it comes to relationships between female artists and male producers. That happens a lot in the industry when you have a lot of people who are kind of dictating to female artists like what their sound should be, what's most popular, how they should reconstruct themselves as artists to fit into what sells. Like we've definitely heard stories about that, Shay, like where we have artists that are dealing with some of these unsavory characters and they've had these negative experiences in the industry because they are women. So I'm wondering too, I know you said you had a positive experience and everything. Like, has there ever been a time working in this industry where you felt like you've been set back in some way because you're a woman?
Um, you know, I wouldn't say it was because I've been very fortunate. The producers I've worked with, I met them through friends. They were all very considerate. I think there was only one time, and again, I usually have my own process of like, I usually will have a test run and see how it goes with the producer on the first meeting. And then if I don't like it, I don't like it and I move on. And that's okay to do that. And I think sometimes people get trapped in the thought that, oh, I've started this conversation with this person, I have to work with them now. And that's not the case. You should really do what's best for you and what's best for them too. Maybe the partnership isn't good for them. Don't force it. But I would say, sorry, I've gotten too far from the question, but it, oh, it was there ever like a bad experience? Or was I ever like put down really? I would say being a woman, when I was younger, I was very timid and I didn't want to offend anyone. I think that's where it gets hard sometimes because I don't, maybe it's just like societal norms that have like caused this or whatever, but I always felt really shy telling people what I really thought about a song. But it's not their fault if they don't know what I'm thinking. So after a while, I was like, I should just say what I'm thinking, because if I don't, I'm not going to get what I want. And it's also fine to not fight, but like disagree with someone. I think sometimes in our culture, we've been raised in such a way that we don't want to ever offend anyone, but that shouldn't be the case either. There's no way to create good art unless you actually work for it and, you know, bounce off each other's ideas and fight sometimes. So I think the only setback for me was being a little too timid initially. And that was just because I wasn't used to it and I didn't know how the music, like creating music, worked really. But once I had enough experiences, I was like, I'm ready. Let's do this. That might be because I went to an all-girls school and like they really push that on you, like, hey, you better like stand up for yourself. But I think everyone should just do what's best for them and fight for what you love. So
And that's beautiful, and I think that applies to really everyone. Because
Yeah,
you're dropping life lessons pretty much. Like, instead of forcing yourself to be in a position with somebody that, doesn't really share the same vision as you, go out, be brave enough, be bold enough to go out and find the people that do see your vision. Not even just the people who do see your vision, but the people who you can connect with to bring a vision to life. Instead of like letting certain people stand in your way. I guess maybe that's a little bit too harsh.
I don't know about standing in your way. It just seems like, I mean, when you were talking about like being timid and it just being something that's kind of like innately like almost natural and something you had to get over, I think that that is something that is put into the minds of like girls, you know, is not to be mean. It's to, you know,
yeah.
to smile when you're told to smile. It's to not cause a fuss. It's to say, yeah, oh, not a problem. Yeah, of course. Yeah. You know, and when you get to the point where you have to say no, sometimes it's difficult for women and myself included to be like, no, that's not okay with me, or that's not the direction I was hoping to go with this. Which is not like you're trying to like offend anybody, but there's something that you're just like, oh, I don't want to hurt your feelings or something. But um, I think that, you know, like, good for your all girls school for telling you to stand up for yourself, because like I think that, you know, when you bring a group of women together like that in a school or in other places, it's very much like, no, you, it's totally valid for you to say no, stand up for yourself, that's totally fine. Like, it's a new mentality almost for young women though, and so
Yeah.
be able to recognize that and kind of like focus our energy on reversing that psychology that was put into our brain. Yeah, it's difficult, but it's something that has to be overcome. And like when you are finding somebody that you work with, whether it's a bandmate or a producer, if they don't match your image or your creative experience, being a producer is also an art form. You know, it really is. If it's the same level as if somebody doesn't match your style, you know, on an instrument, it's like, you might be great at what you do, thank you, but that's just not for me. Thank you, next.
Yeah, like I wouldn't mesh well with someone who like only loves death metal. Like imagine that, it wouldn't work. Like not saying death metal's bad, but like we're not the same.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe I would give that a try just like once because it would be fun, but
Yeah, but I know my style of music probably wouldn't work.
not.
Well,
No.
that's kind of a perfect segue into like talking about your music, because I want to talk about Fingers Crossed.
Oh
And
sure.
yeah, and like some of the thought process behind Fingers Crossed and like how you really came to make it. Um, yeah, if you want to talk about that, like that
Yeah,
artistic
sure.
process.
Yeah, so fingers crossed. I started writing. I was so sad because I knew I was gonna leave New York soon. Um, and this was like last year, like kind of December time. I knew I was gonna be leaving, And it had been like 5 years of me living in New York, and I was like, wow, I'm gonna really miss everyone here. But at the same time, I'm glad I'm leaving because New York had worn me out. I was like, all right, it's been real, gotta go. So, and I was excited for the move, but at the same time, there were people there and places that I was really going to miss. Um, and I was like on a subway ride, just thinking like the lyrics. And the funny part about that song is that I've rewritten that song, I think 50 times, um, just with different melodies, and I
What?
have all the voice notes, and I do that a lot when it's a song I really love. When
Mhm.
it comes to the lyrics, I really love because I don't want to mess up the song. I am so fearful that it's not going to sound good. So I was like, if I'm going to release a song, it has to sound good, like it, or at least I have to be happy with how it sounds, because it's such a close song to me. So I played a bunch of different versions of it. Again, like just me and a voice note, me and my guitar. And then finally, after quarantine hit, at the beginning of quarantine, I was supposed to stay in New York until that summer and then move, straight from New York to California. But quarantine happened. And my parents were like, why don't you come to Virginia? Like, we never get to hang out. So I was like, okay, sure. So I moved a bit earlier, went to Virginia. And while I was in Virginia, it finally came to me. It was almost like I needed to leave for me to finalize that song.
Mhm.
And it was just kind of my goodbye letter to everyone. And I had already been talking with my friend Joe Lamberti about working on the song, and he was like, "Okay, well, here are some people we can work with for producers," and he introduced me to Corey, who's his friend, and now my friend. But the funny part was, I've never met Corey in person, and I've worked on so many songs with him now. So the whole song we did um, over email and texting, and me sending him recordings. We were never in the same room. I've never met him in person. So
What?
yeah,
So
which
is
is
that because of quarantine?
because of quarantine. I would have he lives in I would have absolutely gone to see him, but I would say my songs from the past, like I would say my past four songs have all been over email, and my upcoming album is all quarantine, like all like from this apartment, me recording and sending it to people. We've never been in the same
It
room.
doesn't sound any less,
Thank you.
which is crazy because like I guess that really does prove that you could work with anybody anywhere that's connected to the internet.
It was really hard because I had to learn, but you know what? It's better to learn it. Like I was like, all right, Logic, you and me are gonna be buddies now. How do I work with you? How do I get this microphone to work well? Um, but I think it was for the better because I don't know. I feel like I've learned so much more about music and how to create it and how to really work with different people, especially when you're not in the same room. A lot of FaceTime calls happen. Basically in the same room. But a lot of back and forth of like of this is the next mix, this is the next mix, let's keep going. But that song was the first song I worked on with Corey, my first song with him, and he did a fantastic job. Joey was there to help too. And I'm really happy with how it came out. But yeah, that song is very close to me just because I had to say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, the
I just,
song
for
itself.
me, I want to talk about how you wrote that. You just casually said this. You wrote that 50 times. Like you
I
really,
would say not necessarily all of the lyrics didn't change. Some
okay,
of the lyrics did,
okay.
but it's mostly the melody that I kept redoing. And I did not send all 50 versions to Joey or Corey. That would have been a nuisance. But I personally, every day for like a month, I was like, what am I gonna do with this song? And eventually it worked out. But I've heard different singers, like they kind of do the same thing where they've worked on a song and they can't figure it out and they don't touch it for like 10 years and then they'll go back to it and then they figure it out.
Yeah,
Some
and
people
to
can't
me
do
that
that.
just shows your dedication to your craft. Like because nowadays I think you see, and this isn't everybody obviously, but I think you're seeing, or we're all seeing, a lot of artists that are pursuing artistry for the sake of fame
Yeah.
and for the sake of attention or for the sake of just money. Um, and we had a conversation about that with Maya J in an interview that we did before about, how she had run into some people that, didn't really have that passion, and how she's seen people who are just out here for like the superficiality of artistry. But you, I mean, the fact that you are that dedicated to your work, I think to me
Thank you.
inspiring because we don't see that as much anymore. So I wanted to throw that out there too.
Thank you so much. That's sweet. But I do agree with you. I do wish people took it more seriously, or at least had more of a passion for it, because if it's not there, I don't know how you're gonna make it. Like, you really gotta love this.
Mhm.
I had so many internal fights with myself about whether or not to even pursue it, and I was like, all right, I'm too crazy about it. Like, I can't not do it. It would be the biggest regret of my life. So yeah.
Yeah, it is a labor of love for sure.
Yeah.
But and the melody that you landed on, I mean, that with the combination of your lyrics, which were also so personal, I mean, that song really is very very intimate, and it almost feels like heartbreaking but like comforting. And I think that that's, I actually just moved also from New York, and
Oh, nice.
yeah, I know. I think I've been here for like a month and a half or something now, but I left my friends behind there. I was only there for a year, so not 5, but still like
Still a long time though for New York.
yeah, I feel accomplished because of that year, but
Yeah.
I definitely feel like I am feeling that transitional sadness, but also like coming into a new environment and thriving. But um, yeah, and I really feel the an emotional connection to that song, whether or not it was intended. It really
That
like
makes me so happy.
it's beautiful. I mean,
Thank
your
you.
words and your voice truly truly carry itself through the entire song. So
That's so sweet. Thank you so much. That makes me happy. I'm glad someone thought that. That's good. That was the goal.
good, you hit it, you did it.
Thanks.
You're right. You write music, you said, about yourself and like your experiences in your life. But are there any artists that inspire you? I know you mentioned Taylor Swift, but like, are there any artists that
She's
inspire
like my god, but I'm just too obsessed with her. Sorry. Just because I grew up listening to her, and I was like, ever since I was a child, I was like, how do I do that? So she's
Our last interview, Barbara Teresa, was also very much inspired by Taylor Swift. So
you? Yes, very much
no
so.
shame.
who isn't? Who isn't? But I would say so. Funny enough, I grew up. My parents are from Iran, so I didn't grow up with a lot of American music, and they're bands who like people would think it's funny for someone my age who like I geek out about. But the Bee Gees, love them. They're
Yeah.
great. I have such nostalgia. Like when I listen to them, my heart is like, oh God, it just hits me in a certain way. Um, like their song Jive Talkin' puts me in such a good mood. I'm like, no jive talkin'. But it's
Yes.
good.
Yes.
I love their music. But I would say growing up, it was Bee Gees, Celine Dion, like all of those, and a bunch of Iranian singers too. Like there's Gugush or Mansoor, but so I had a very eclectic like
Yeah.
taste. Eventually, in recent days, like I not many people like to say that they like pop. I don't know why, even though like it's very popular. But I love people like Halsey, people like Taylor Swift, Haim. I just all of those singers, like their stories mean a lot to me. Also Ed Sheeran, I was so obsessed with him. His music, I think Divide was my favorite album. It just every single song I was like, this is the best thing ever. Um, but people who can write stories with their music just
Hmm.
really influence me, and I love them for it because they're sharing part of their world with me.
Like I think it's for Ed Sheeran. I'm a big Ed Sheeran fan actually.
Hey.
So like Castle on the Hill, I think is what
Oh,
that I loved that. I love songs that are about a person's journey like from childhood to adulthood, and they're talking about their life and their experiences, just like making friends, losing friends, marrying somebody, leaving that person and marrying somebody else, having kids, watching them grow up. Like songs like that. 7 Years, I think is what it's called, by Lucas Graham. Like that was a really big,
yeah,
yeah, that was like, oh, just through the timeline, just nothing but tears.
love
So,
it.
I mean, and your music to me is very like similar to that because you like to tell stories too. So that's one of the reasons that I personally appreciate your music and appreciate
Thank you.
you, for existing and being intimate and like vulnerable enough to tell your story. So
Thank
I
you.
think, but in the interest of time, since I think we are running a little bit low on time, I want to go ahead and ask our usual final question, Shay. I'll ask one of them. Um, what advice do you have to give to young creatives that are aspiring to get into the industry? And specifically, since it is Women's History Month, any female creatives, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I would say um, first for in general for all creatives,
Mhm.
if it's something that you think you can't live without and there's no other job that can compare to it, go for it because you're going to regret it later. And even if you don't make it, it's still an amazing journey. Like, I'm never going to look back on these moments and think, wow, this was a waste of time. I'm learning a lot about myself and I'm doing something I really love. So I think people get really nervous about whether or not to take the leap, and I think they should, just because you're going to regret it later in life. And for my women creatives, stand up to people. Do not be scared. Do do not back down and always say what's on your mind because otherwise no one is going to know and you're going to regret not saying what was on your mind at that moment. Like I would say even at like when I had my full-time job, like sometimes I get way too anxious and I wouldn't give like say my ideas during meetings.
Mhm.
And then later I regretted it. I was like, what am I doing? Like it's not like they're gonna bite me or something. Like I should try it. So it I think it's really important to stand up for yourself and honestly believe in yourself. I think a lot of it has to do with confidence. And if you have to take time to work on it, do it because it's going to help you in the long run.
Well, my question is if you have any new and upcoming projects that you want to tell us about.
Yeah. So I've got a song coming out March 24th. It's called Polaroid, and I'm really excited. This is another like story thing, but this time it's fictional. It's not actually about me. And this one I had so much fun with because it's New York. One of my favorite things is that you could go into a bar and meet a random person. I think in New York, I met at least one new person every week. You meet hundreds of people when you're there. So
Yeah.
I wrote a story about okay, what would it be like if you fell in love with a stranger? And how would that play out? And it's called Polaroid, and I'm really excited for everyone to hear it. So,
That's coming out pretty soon. So
yeah,
that's exciting. That's very, very fresh in your mind, I'm sure. Um,
yeah,
that's awesome. So Polaroid, check it out. March 24th, you said?
yeah.
Okay, all right. Um, well, this has been. Do you have anything else you wanted to share with us, or maybe we missed something? I mean, like, I just want to ask.
You guys have been lovely. I love this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Absolutely. Thank you for just coming on because, like, honestly, like,
Sure.
it's a privilege to get a chance to talk to artists like you, I think.
Anytime.
Well, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of TCR, the Cultural Resets Artist Interview Series. Feel free to give us a follow on Instagram and all across our social media channels. Um, and feel free to join us next week when we interview another groundbreaking artist who's
And
changing.
make sure to follow Susan and keep an eye out for her new song Polaroid.
Thank you.
The